Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Tenet. And if it sounds different, this is the first review, at least, that I'm recording with my new microphone. So it sounds a little better. I hope so. Anyway, Christopher Nolan's Tenet. Tenet is a puzzle box made in the way only Christopher Nolan could make a puzzle box. It's a very Christopher Nolan-y film. There's no way to deny that he has his fingerprints all over it. It's very much an auteur blockbuster in, full stop. In a lot of ways, it shows, I think, the best of what Christopher Nolan can do with these kind of large-scale blockbusters, how he's really great at them. When you hear a puzzle box in terms of a movie, most of the time we roll our eyes and we know that the mystery is going to turn out to be sort of nothing, and the director's sort of using their own technical prowess to kind of like push you through that anyway. Christopher Nolan actually manages to do that better than anyone. J.J. Abrams, that's what I'm talking about. But the one who's not good at it. Christopher Nolan is actually good at it. I don't know if this film totally, makes 100% sense or has a necessarily really a big point other than isn't this time inversion thing really neat, but he's still really good at it. I think that's one of the things when I was watching Tenet, I was like, this might seem silly, and I don't know if he 100% nails everything in this movie, especially about the larger details, and visually in some ways he's really impressive, in other ways he's really limited, but all of that really comes together in this. This is a solid entry in his filmography. You could definitely, check this out after Inception and all those things. I do feel like Tenet's biggest issues is Nolan himself, because it's like he is so into this time thing and he's so into these concepts, but he often has this weird mesh of his style with kind of older science fiction, and that this is maybe not a compliment, but I noticed what he does a lot is he'll explain things to you, and in older science fiction films it was because the studio isn't really going to give them a budget, so you got to just explain this thing. And in Nolan's case, it's the studio sort of is giving you the budget, man, so I don't really understand oftentimes when you just won't show us these things, or have an animated sequence, or to understand these concepts a little better. And I think he thinks it's a smarter way, but it honestly just to me feels like he doesn't really know how to visualize it. He just likes the idea of the concept, but then wants to show me in a cool large set piece. That's his style. I get it. I can't really complain about that at this point, because going into this I was like, oh yeah, this is Christopher Nolan. This is not a good entry point. I would say Memento, which was mine, or Inception, or those Batman movies and stuff. This is more of just a solid oh, you're into Christopher Nolan, well, after you've seen all the classics you should check this one out. And it feels sort of mid-tier in the best sense, actually. I think Dunkirk might be a bigger achievement. This just feels like he's making a kind of movie he could make, and he made it pretty good and stuff. I'm a fan of time travel stuff. I'm not the biggest fan of Nolan. I'm not as obsessed with him as a lot of people are. To me, it's I still see all of them. I enjoy quite a bit of them. I think the past decade hasn't been as great to him as the previous decade was. Because of them, I think Inception and Dunkirk were pretty great, but then Dark Knight Rises and Interstellar, I wouldn't exactly be proclaiming my love for those two. I kind of thought those were kind of big misses, but this in itself, I think, with Tenet, is a solid entry for him, and it kind of shows you how good of a filmmaker he is, because I think a lot of directors would fall into the nonsense kind of complications of this. And sure, I think a lot of times, even though I sort of could guess all the time loop stuff, everyone, I was I bet that's that guy. And I was right. Almost every time I guessed it. In terms of time loops, I think Predestination does a better job. But he does have a lot of fun with it, and you can tell he's having fun. You tell he likes this sort of thing. The thing with this, and one of the things that really doesn't work, is he kind of does a thing that Walter Hill did with The Driver, which eventually Drive would be very influenced by. But The Driver basically did the thing where it was there was the driver, the cop, the girl. It's a genre deconstruction. That's the point of why these characters are called that. In this, John David Washington's character is called the protagonist, and you're sort of what are you saying something about that? I mean, he is the protagonist, but what are you saying with it? And I don't think he is doing a genre deconstruction. He purposely even admits he's not saying anything about genre, but sort of wants to, but then isn't, but then didn't want to study the spy genre but wants to use it. And why are you using it? Like, what are you saying with that thing? He clearly named him protagonist to say something about storytelling other than that he is the protagonist. I could not figure out what that was. And I think, like, if you're going to do those things, like the driver is a genre deconstruction that is interesting, whereas I think Tenet isn't really doing that and doesn't want to do that, but also is trying to, like, what's the point of him being called that? I don't really want to explain the plot because it's basically just John David Washington gets involved, or the protagonist gets involved in learning about this kind of time inversion thing and trying to figure out the guy who is behind it, who's getting messages from the future because they believe there is going to be a great war. Eventually they sort of drop that, and there's like this weapon they're trying to find that could just destroy everything. And if you really get into the plot of that, that doesn't make like any fucking sense. I like what he did with the cast. I think John David Washington is an interesting casting choice, and I don't think Nolan is really known for interesting casting choices, to be honest, but I think it's an interesting one because he feels a little looser. He's a little more playful. He doesn't feel like he's within the auteur's world as much. He feels like someone out of place. Also, Gisriel is not known for a lot of diversity in his casting, but I think John David Washington has a great energy to it. I'm sure, if you had Tom Hardy would have played within the Christopher Nolan this, maybe that would have been more appropriate. I've heard a lot of people say, was Tom Hardy offered John David Washington's part? Was he offered Robert Pattinson's part? Did he say no or something? I couldn't find any information on anything like that, but I think Tom Hardy's so associated with Christopher Nolan at this point, you just expect that he's going to show up. Robert Pattinson is good at playing like a part that normally you'd see with Tom Hardy. I think he's good at being that kind of more elusive, fun kind of character actor thing. He seems to really like being a character actor in this, and it kind of shows, reminds me of Good Time and everything he's really good at as an actor, as well as Elizabeth Debicki. This movie does not treat women well, and I don't like the whole idea of like, oh, she's gonna like not be around her son and she's being separated from her son. I would love if her son was like the worst person ever. I think that would be fucking hilarious. I don't think they're gonna do that. They don't show the son at all, basically. I could not tell you what that kid looked like after watching this movie. Like, I really couldn't. He's like a major fixture in this movie, but you just never see him. But she's a great actress. I heard she got cast because of Widows, and she was great in Widows. That makes sense to me. Both Kenneth Branagh and Aaron Taylor Johnson are basically playing better versions of roles they weren't very good in bad movies. So like Kenneth Branagh is playing a better version of the villain in Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit because, everyone remembers that one. He's much better in this as doing the Russian oligarch guy than he was in Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit, because it's sort of interesting seeing him having done that in a previous movie that he was like real bad in, and in this he's much better at that role. It kind of shows you the difference between a director like Kenneth Branagh, who directed himself in that, and Christopher Nolan. And then same with Aaron Taylor Johnson, who it seemed like he's playing like the army guy much better than he was in Godzilla. Like, why was any of this character in Godzilla? I have no clue. He's Blandy McBlanderson in that, and now he's so much more compelling. I don't know if that was on purpose, but like the idea of that those were within, I guess it's been a while for both those movies, but it's kind of interesting. I was like, man, if I saw Tenet first, I would have thought both those guys could do those other roles real good. Yeah, anyway, I want to talk more about the logistics of this. So if you've not seen Tenet and you don't want it spoiled for you, this is your warning. There will be chapter thingies and all that. So I can continue with this part of the review, basically. So the whole thing with Tenet and having the idea of this giant weapon, I think the more I think about the weapon thing and the whole idea of the logistics of what these people are going to do, it sort of falls apart. And maybe that's like people keep saying like this is Nolan's idea of a Bond movie, even though I think Bond did that with Skyfall, which was sort of their answer to Nolan, but whatever. In it, he's trying to stop this weapon from being assembled because it can like destroy all time and all this stuff, and how the people want to go back in time because the world is falling apart because of global warming. So they want to stopping the future from destroying the past, basically. But anyway, that nonsense, it didn't make any sense to me. They could have explained that more. And I think the whole thing with the weapon, I wish they had like had a sequence that like explained that, or we see someone's like visualization of that or something, because it just seemed like we never see these people. Like, if everything, the whole idea of math and time that's going on in this there's things that just aren't fully like explained very well, and I guess it's supposed to be like, oh, it's mysterious, but at a certain point it's like, do you have like an answer to these things? Your storytelling, like, is there an answer to your storytelling? Are you just being mysterious for the sake of it? Does that work in the movie? Yes. And I think that says a lot about Christopher Nolan as a director, because when I'm watching the movie, I'm not thinking about like, what's the point of this stupid weapon? Shouldn't we be seeing rich people walking backwards in a, special area because they don't want to live in like the destroyed future, global warming thing? I like when blockbusters are like, because I really care about the environment, and now I will not talk about it for the rest of this movie. And same with when you find out about Robert Pattinson's character, like, so how far can you time travel within this, and how far does this inversion work? Because I don't understand the full rules of that, and clearly he understands it. But it's like, I don't understand that at all. Like, there's certain logics to it that like want to be mysterious and weirder. But again, like, I feel like there's certain sequences in this that can be very beautiful, like towards the end battle sequence. There's certain parts I really like where you see basically like a wall that like has already seen an explosion, and then it explodes like inverted, and you see it like come back together. That looked actually really amazing. And certain things without building coming back and forth. But then it's like when you look at like the wide shots, you couldn't see like people walking in the reverse order and like things. I wish they played around with that, and I think that's one of my problems with Nolan, is like he goes into people's dreams, but it just looks like a bunch of Michael Mann movies. Like, he has people doing this inversion thing, but you think he'd play more around and be a little more surreal with. He doesn't play in the way. There's not too much visual feast other than like, look at this set piece, and I'm like, I don't know if I like really need that in my life as much as you think I do. Like, I would much rather have a visual stylist who's going to play around with this concept than what Nolan does, which is like, let's talk about it and then have people run around with guns. And even like that fight when John David Washington is apparently fighting himself, that was not like a well choreographed fight. That was awkward as all hell. And like, did you consult people who actually do fight choreography, or were you so in love with this concept you're going to have the concept work that way? There are just some things with him that I'm always like, you get so close and you have all these opportunities and you have all this money to make these films, and then it's like you sort of skimp on certain things because it like has the perceived Criterion artistry, and I don't really necessarily think that works as well. And I think you can see that all throughout Tenet, where it's like, explain this time travel thing more, like show the weirdness of it, show people like living in the past stuff, have fun with this concept. I think a horror director has more fun and goes deeper into their concepts than Nolan does, because Nolan shouts it in mystery. But I think what works about Nolan is he understands how to keep the movie moving, that when you're watching it, you're not really questioning it. You're having it is a good experience of a film. A lot of people are like, is it worth, dying to see in the theater? I don't agree with that, but if you were to see it in the theater and you could safely and all those things, I think it would be quite an experience, actually, because he's very good at building this momentum, building this motion picture, having it have this like very upward momentum going throughout it. Even though it's a 2.5 hour movie, I think it only lulls in certain parts, and you do start to kind of question the things. I didn't have the issues with the sound that everyone said they did. I actually forgot about it, to be honest. Like, I could follow it fine. I don't know what everyone's problem with their ears are or something. Like, it didn't sound, I watched it on my laptop, so sorry. I didn't have any issues with it. I don't know if the mix was different in the theaters. I've never had this sound issue with him. I have noticed in the theaters it usually sounds a little worse, but I didn't have any issues with the sound. I thought I could hear everything. It was a little muddled, but whatever. Christopher Nolan, as a director, is who he is. And in this film, I kind of have come to this point with him where, like, I don't think maybe he's like the great auteur of this age, or like the new Kubrick, or whatever he thinks he is, whatever. But I think he's very good at messing with time and chronology and everything like that. If you look at Memento, if you look at Dunkirk, if you look at Inception, I think those are three of his that do that excellently well. Is Tenet, as good as those? No, but those are like, pretty big movies, so that's not fair. But I think this is a decent follow-up to all of those. Maybe it's the B-side to it or something like that. But you can tell it's fun to watch Nolan, like, have fun with these concepts. I can tell in his own Nolan way, it's really working for him. And I might not love everything he does as a director. He might not lift me up, put me in exuberance like most people, but I still had a good time with it. Like, I would easily watch this movie again. I think my wife didn't get to watch it with me, so I think I am going to watch it again. But like, I could easily watch this again and not like have fun with it. And I think some of his better ones, like Inception, like Dunkirk, like Memento, I've wanted to. And I think like a good director, he does that. I think he himself in his presentation acts like he's a lot deeper, but he's just a very good puzzle box blockbuster director. He's much better than anyone is at that currently in terms of the scale. Sure, Shane Carruth can like outdo him any day of the week, regardless of our all current feelings on Shane Carruth. But when I look at Christopher Nolan, is just in his own Christopher Nolan way, this was an excellent kind of movie for him. I think this works very well in his own ethos. I don't think it's like an amazing film, but as a blockbuster, it's a really solid one, actually. It's one you have a decent enough time with, and, you know, if you had a night at the movies, you'd be like, hey, that was fun. And that's kind of as far as it really goes. I don't think it reinvents the wheel. I don't think visually, you know, I would have liked to see those birds fly backwards more. I think more people talk about the weird bird thing than we actually see it, which, like, come on, man. Like, most of it is actually low-tech stuff, like showing things in reverse is not actually technically that impressive, but I sort of wish there was a little bit more. But I think I can't fault someone who I know what their director and auteur voice really is. I get what that is, and I should just sort of go with it, you know? And if I go with it, I think this is a perfectly fine movie. I think it works within the Nolan-ness of it. So if you're seeing this to see, I want to see the Christopher Nolan time inversion movie, you won't be disappointed at all. And I think it works within what it's supposed to be. If you're looking for more than that, maybe you would be disappointed. But if you want the Christopher Nolan time inversion movie, Tenet is absolutely perfect in what it's attempting to be. And maybe in a way he did make a genre film. Maybe his genre statement is on himself, and he gave us the perfect Christopher Nolan cheeseburger. So if you have seen Tenet and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.